Right, let's do this then. Hi guys, I hope everyone's doing well. In this video, I want to show you guys how to stack deals and how to create a spreadsheet to do so. Now, understand not everyone is tech savvy and know how to use spreadsheets, so I figured it'd be a good idea rather than just doing a written article to actually go through the motions and show you guys how to use a spreadsheet to help you create something that you can use again and again to stack deals and potentially make something that's really good and specific to your needs. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm just going to go through the basics. So to put into criterias what I'm potentially going to be stacking here will be quite simple. As you learn a bit more about properties and different strategies, and obviously it'll be a bit more complicated. So I'm thinking starting off with a buy-to-let should give you a good foundation to do so. So without further ado, let's get started then. First things first, what we want to do is open up Excel and bring up a spreadsheet. Now, with this step, I'm assuming that you've gone through certain due diligence with a potential property that might be of interest. Maybe you found it on Rightmove or Zoopla, is on the market somewhere, and you just want to run through some basic numbers to help you with verifying whether it is a good deal or is a deal for you or not. So what I want to do is obviously get started with a basic skeleton of the spreadsheet. And then I can go through the different formulas that I use to then help you achieve the outcome. So what I like to do is first name the spreadsheet. So for this one, let me call it buy-to-let spreadsheet super stacker, just to give it a sort of a name. And then what you want to do is, well, what I like to do is separate it out into different sections. So for me, I have purchases costs on one side, and then the outcomes on another side, and then any potential financing that you might need for the actual property. So if I were to create a box here, I can show you an example of what I mean. So I'm saying create a box here like that. I've got a heading here. Let's just highlight it so it's a bit easier to see. So let's say for this property you want to obviously purchase price at a certain level. So the first thing that you would get is, I'll just say title for this. So let's say purchase price, and then obviously on this side you would want to put down what you've potentially purchased it for. So on this column, let me just highlight the column and press this button so that it makes it into all numbers based, basically, to help yourself. So this would be the input of the data. So for this one, I'm working out a property that might be a terrace house. So a typical terrace property in my area, 2 to 3 bedroom property, you probably might be purchasing between 60 to 70k, depending on the level of works that it needs. I'll usually go with heavy refurbishments. So let's say, for argument's sakes, is purchasing it for 60k, and one that needs full renovation. And then you're going to need to think about all the different associated costs that is allocated or associated with this number. So let's say you're going to have solicitors fees, and this is the conveyancing part. Let's say nowadays 1200. You might have broker fees. So depending on what you actually purchase with as well, there's a few finance options which you'll see in other modules that I've highlighted. The typical ones for something like this, you can use a bridge to buy it. If it doesn't need any work, you can straight buy it for mortgage. Development finance is also a thing, or you can use all cash. So this one, I think I'll get a little bit more technical, and let's say we'll use bridging finance in this scenario. So I'm going to need to work out like a calculation to see how much bridging finance is going to cost you, and then what kind of deposit that you would need to put up front in this scenario. So let's say broker fees, call it £600 on that. The financing fee, I'll do it in a separate place. You probably need stamp duty. Well, you will need stamp duty and this I would put in is 3% of this. So here's your first formula. So if you want to work out 3% of this 60k, simply put equals, highlight that cell, and then what I like to do is times 3%, and £1,800 is 3% of that. Other things that you might want to put in here, there will be other things like if it's HMO, you might have HMO licenses and stuff like that, but I would say these are kind of like the basics that you would need besides the deposits that you need for the purchase of the property. So if we wanted to work out then next, which is bridging finance, I would typically do another section here which is on the financing. So let me just again highlight the cells. Let me merge this. Financing. So let's say we go for bridging finance. So bridge finance for purchase. First thing you want to do is work out what your loan to value is, and that's how much they're potentially going to be lending you. So for this, let's call loan to value at 70%. Well, you can get 75%, so let's put 75% for argument's sake, which means 75% of your loan of 600k, which would be, so if you were to work it out, and again, another trick to work out the 75% of something, equal sign, click and highlight the 60k cell and times 75%. So we can see 75% lending of 60k is 45k. Now the thing with bridging finance is you would have to pay interest on that, and depending on the lender, you know, that amount would vary. Usually for me to stack a deal, I typically go in at 1% as an average. It could be lower, it could be higher, so it just depends on what it is. So let's say for the monthly interest rate at 1%, this, and then you'll work out of this whole amount what is the 1% of that, which again, use the same formula, highlight the cell, times on 1%, which means you're essentially paying £450 a month. Now, to run this across the entire period, how long are you actually going to keep the bridge for? Right, so that's very important, because the longer the bridge is, the more you're going to be paying in interest. And you have to take into factors of purchasing timescales and then the refinancing timescales as well. And usually, you know, I would like to allocate between 9 to 12 months for bridge term. Beauty about this is if you were to pay the bridge back earlier, then it does become cheaper again, because they'll just refund you back the difference. So let's say my period is 12 months, just to make it easy maths. So time period 12 months will be this 450 times 12. So your interest amount is £5,400 for this. Another thing to be to know of is basically there might be entrance and exit fees for something like this, and typically they might combine to be around 2% or 3%. So I'll put 2% on for this example. So entrance and exit fee at 2%. Obviously, feel free to adjust your spreadsheet if you're going to be using something like this. So highlight that cell again, make it 2%, and then the fees on £900 on this. Also, don't forget there's a valuation fee. For a valuer to come out and value the property, something like this, typically I would say would be in the regions of £1,200, but I know that sometimes it could be higher as well. So that is that. So next thing I want to do is to total the amount of this so that we can find out the entire cost and also what you need as a deposit, because with bridging they would take the funds up front and they'll only actually release to you the net amount that you want. So if we do the total bridge facility, it will be equals to the amount that they're lending to you, then they'll minus off the interest payments, and then minus off the fees, and you minus off your valuation fee. Net. So you call this the net advance, which basically means on day one, this is the amount that, let me just highlight this, this is the amount that they'll be released on day one. So in returns, in terms of deposits of what you still need, here it is. So deposit required to complete, which would be the 60k minus what your net advance is what they're giving you as loaning. So for you to complete on this, you still need £22,500 in order to complete the purchase. So for argument's sake, let me just put in here the deposit required as well. Required complete, which will bring you to this amount as well. So the next thing you would need on this would be a total purchasing cost. Purchasing costs, which is deposit plus stamp duty plus your broker fees plus your solicitor fees. So this amount here is the amount of funds you would need in order to buy a property that is 60k that you've agreed on. And again, keep in mind that this you would need refinancing on as well once you purchased it. So in terms of the next part is working out your renovation costs, and with that is another part where you need to, and I mean I would say at this stage the best thing you can do is do an estimate, and I know builders, contractors can help with giving out estimates. By no means is it any fixed prices at this point in time because you don't actually know what needs doing. So as you get more experience, you'll get more idea of what you want to do and how you want to do it. So you can get a fairly good estimate based on what it is. Of course, you can also use a QS and ask for their advice, but obviously they'll be charging a fee for a report as such to help you break down the costs. So what I like to do is full renovation. So something like this, you know, if it's a 2-3 bedroom terrace, full renovation right now, I would be using a benchmark of around 35 to 40k as a renovation cost. So that is kind of like what I would throw in there in order to see if the numbers stack as a benchmark. Now obviously if the numbers don't stack, you're always welcome to tweak that in the sense that you might decide on not to do as much as a full renovation. Maybe there are parts you want to keep, such as, let's say, there's an existing kitchen that is not too bad. You can, you know, tart it up or leave it altogether, so that you don't incur the extra cost of getting a new kitchen and having it fitted. So no matter what you do, you know, it's up to you to decide how you want to go about with actually doing the renovation costs and what number you put in here. So what I will do is just put an estimated renovation amount on here. So let's say I use 40k, sticking with easy numbers, to show you guys what this is. So I'll put in 40k for a renovation cost. There might be other things you might want to leave in a contingency as well. So usually it might be a good idea to have a contingency of around 10%. If 10 to 15% is quite standard, if you're quite confident in what your numbers might be. So, but this part is what you need in terms of capital to actually do the project. So if I were to work out a full sum at the end, there might be other things as well, like if it's a HMO, you might need to put in costs for HMO licenses or furniture, but in this case, again, I want to keep it simple, so I'll just have one line for renovation costs. Obviously, you're free to also tweak this and add as much fields as you want. So if I put on this, total overall costs that you need in terms of capitals would be the purchasing cost plus the renovation cost, which all in total is this number. Great, so usually that's the main first part of the stacking done. The next part will then to be analysed what your exits are and what potentially the deal would look like once you put those numbers in. So what I like to do here is open up a new box usually to help me do that, and I'll just go ahead and do the same on this side for the exit finance. So let me just clean up some of these titles. Refinance. I'll call this refinance, and I'll call this development finance. Bridge financing. And this would be called outcomes. So with this, let's say now is where we stack in terms of seeing how it works. So the first thing that we want to do is establish what is your rental income if it's something to keep. So for buy-to-let, you're going to keep it, and then you're going to be refinancing it. So the first thing you need to do is establish what a rental income is per month. So for a 2 to 3 bedroom terrace in my area, I would say current market rents are between £650 to £700. Right, so £700 would be on the end of a 3 bed, more than a 2 bed, but definitely £650 is achievable. So let me just put this here. So monthly rent will be £700, and then which means gross annual rent, assuming that there's no voids in this case, will be the 700 times by 12. 8,400 would be your gross rent. Then you need to work out what your potential GDV is. GDV, for people that don't know, stands for gross development value, and basically that is just the end value of your property. For a property like this, if it's done up to a high standard, high spec, I would expect a GDV of between 120k to 130k in my estimates. So let's say I go in the middle and go up with 125k will be the GDV of this. Now, in terms of the refinancing part, here is a few options. So usually when we refinance to long term, you'd be given term loans starting from 2 years to 3 years to 5 years to 10 years in some cases. And the mortgage rates would be affected quite heavily with that. So with this calculation, I'm going to go on the assumption that you're doing 75% loan to value for 5 years and an interest rate of 6%. Right, that can be flexed to see what kind of outcomes it is. So in my refinance section, what I'll do is I'll put these stats in and let's see what numbers come out of this. So let's say, so let me mimic the GDV here at 125, and then loan to value at 75%, which means, so you grab this times 75%, which means at 75% loan to value, you'll be taking out 93,750 in this scenario. Then what you would need to do is work out your mortgage monthly payments, which would be, you know, an interest only payment usually if you want it to cash flow. So first only at, so let's say interest only at 6%. To work out this calculation, you take this number of what's been borrowed, you times it by 6%. That would give you the annual, and then you can come here and work out the monthly interest payment. So you take this amount and you divide by 12, and it's £468.75 for interest only payments. Okay, so what you do next is go back to the other side and then work out your expenses for this property. So to do that, you can let me just do a title of expenses. Then the first one will be monthly mortgage repayment. That we've just worked out here. Monthly mortgage repayment. So the things you think about for is you're going to need lettings fee. So lettings fee is a number here. Usually we'll work out lettings fee at around 10% for standard buy-to-lets, and that is the 10% of the monthly rent. So £700 times 10% gives you £70. With a buy-to-let, you won't need to pay council tax or utility bills, unlike HMOs, so it's a lot simpler than that. You might want to leave a section for voids as well, but you know, personal preferences. Personally, I think for buy-to-lets, usually you shouldn't really get any voids, especially if it's a more long-term kind of contract. So I would say it's safe there. But something that I will do is kind of like leave a set amount aside for any sort of maintenance that might occur throughout renting the property. So usually for that, I will work out, maybe save around 5% of a kitty. So I call it MOE, monthly operational expensive. Monthly operational expenses, let's say at 5%. Which would mean, again, times that by 5%, £35. Here at the end, we can total up the expenses of these three fields equals this plus this plus this, which means your total expense is £573. So from this, we can work out your net cash flow. So in a net cash flow position, flow is your monthly rent minus your expenses, which will give you £126 a month, and then it'll be annual cash flow here. We'll be taking this number and timesing it by 12 again. So your annual cash flow for this will be £1,515. So you can see that a lot of the expenses right now, unfortunately, has been taken up by the mortgage rates. At 6% here is quite high. In the past, there was nowhere near this number, so you'll be enjoying more cash flow. So with buy-to-lets, you're more looking at the capital appreciation side of things than than anything else at this point in time, depending on where you buy, obviously. So to work out then what return you have, and this is a key metric that I like to use, because it essentially shows you how much money might be stuck in the deal and what's left in the deal, and how long it takes for it to become debt-free, essentially, because the amount of money you invested in it is all being taken out. And that's the refinance, the BRR model, where you refinance and then you go again, essentially. So to work that out, let me just extend this a bit more. We've already got all the pieces together here, so let me just review again. The amount of purchasing costs that you spent overall at this point in time would be the 66,100, and you still owe the bridge the amount of 37,000 essentially, so you still need to take that into account. So if I were to work out here, total cost of spend, is this overall cost plus the actual bridge advance that you need repaying back to bridge lender. Overall cost is £103,000. Now the refinance, if you looked on the right side, has given you back £73,000, which is more than enough to pay back the bridge and recuperate some of your costs in the refurbishments. So if I put it here is amount refinance equals to this amount here, 93,000. You can obviously see a difference between what's spent and what's taken out. So if I do the calculation here, where you take off the cost to spend if you take off the refinanced amount by the cost to spend, then you should get a number in the deal, which I'll call left in the deal number, essentially. So the positive number is the amount of money's gone back out, and then you take it away from the cost to spend, which is 9,850. So just to leave a little note for yourself, if it's a negative number, it means that you have left money in the deal. If it's a positive number, it means that you've taken money out of the deal. And if it's zero, then basically it owes you nothing. So what you put in, you've added enough value to take out everything. So usually I like to leave myself a note on the side just to make that distinguish amount, because sometimes it could be confusing. So number means money left deal. Oops, it's across here again. And then you can work out your ROI from this, and the yield as well. So let's go with yield. If you want to work out yield, it is gross yield. And this is a metric that a lot of people use as well. So gross yield is basically your gross annual rent divided by the GDV, which here doesn't make sense because I need to make it into percentage. If you make it into percentage, use this percentage button here. We can see that for a property like this, my yield is at 7%, which is average, I would say. And down south, yields a lot lower. Moving further up north, yields are a lot higher. Essentially, at 7%, you're actually getting pretty good value in of the property and appreciation in comparison to the monthly rents. If you have a higher gross yield, it means you're going to have higher cash flow in comparison to the value of the property. So that's why some people aim for higher yields, and that's what it means by saying I want to get higher yields, because it means my property is producing me more income than what it's worth, or cash flow in a sense. If you want to work out return on investment, ROI, that's the specific amount that you are working out based on how much money is left in the deal. Again, it's a simple formula that you can use with that, which is basically you've got the 9k that's left in here, and then you've got the annual cash flow. So basically, to do this maths, you need to take the amount that you've got left in the deal equals, the annual cash flow, divide by the amount you've got left in the deal, and then change it to percentage. It says negative here because this number up here is negative, so to change that you're going to need to inverse that. So if you do a multiplier of -1, it will inverse that, and here you see that the return on investments is 15%, right? Which means it will take not 10 years, but a little bit less than 10 years to reclaim this entire amount of monies that's saved in, that's left in the deal to come out. Let me just test this to double check that it's right. So if we use this number, divide by 15%. Oh, that's wrong. Yeah, forget that. But yeah, so that's basically showing you the amounts of monies left in the deal and how long it's going to take to get out again. Yeah, so I hope this has been useful. Again, it's just a quick way of stacking a deal, and this spreadsheet, something you can create yourself. This is how I typically go around doing it, and you know, there's a lot more that goes into it depending on the kind of strategy that you use and how much leverage you use and what different facilities you use. Whether you use angel finance as an example or development finance will change numbers. But typically this is how I would go about stacking a buy-to-let deal. And yeah, you can do it yourself now as well. So I hope this has been useful. What I will do is I'll also attach this spreadsheet as a resource in the module so that you can download it for yourself and have a play around with it. And yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to leave a message in the comments. And hopefully, not hopefully, I'll get back to you. But yeah, hopefully this has been a great help. And again, thank you guys for being part of this amazing community, and I will see you guys again soon. Right, I'm also adding this part onto the end of this video because I've realized I made a little bit of a mistake here in terms of the maths. So what it is what I've done wrong is, rather than including all of the total cost to spend that you can see here, previously what I did do was I added this amount, the overall cost, plus the bridging facility, which is the 37,500 you can see up here, which gave me 103. What I actually forgot to add on to this, and take into account, is the interest amount that's required to be paid as well, which is actually the full 45k amount here, rather than the 37.5k. So in terms of the maths, rather than adding these two numbers together, the 37.5, sorry, and the 66,100, you add the 45, which again will change the number. So if I do this and edit this cell to add the 45k instead, because essentially that's what you're borrowing, then it comes to 111,000 amount spent. The left in monies is £17,000, which gives you an ROI of 9%, which is what I was expecting more. So the 15%, I was questioning myself to see why it's so high. So 9% on such a deal right now is quite standard. It's quite an average sort of deal, but hey, a 10% return on investment over the long period of time is still a good investment. Please don't forget, you would get a capital appreciation as well of the property over the 10-year period. So overall, you'll be gaining more than 9% return if you are to sell the property. So yeah, just wanted to correct myself on this one. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you guys too much. But again, any questions, let me know in the comments. See you soon.